Obama's favorite Republican, which is to say a Democrat, that would be New York Times columnist David Brooks. The Republican columnist at the New York Times, right. He does this end of the week confab with Jonathan Capehart for PBS, in which they opine about goings on. And their end of the year review of the presidential race and the economic landscape upon which this presidential race will be run was this. At least this was David Brooks's offering. Of course, Capehart's was even worse, so it gives you a sense of the expanse of the parameters of debate on that show. Basically, the eye of a needle.
But to me, our national situation has been solved, S-A-L-V-E-D, by the strength of the economy, by a lot of good things that are happening underneath politics. So economic growth is phenomenal right now. Unemployment is low. Inflation is down. Income inequality is down. Wages are up. Real wages are up. And so if it was not predicted that we would reduce this inflation without sliding into recession, and we seem to be doing it. And if we had not, if we'd fallen into 7% unemployment, 10%, can you imagine where the country would be? So just to pay tribute maybe to the Fed, but to somebody, the economy is really good. And the best thing is America is not a country in decline. Our economy is outpacing Europe, Japan, China now. And so there are underlying good forces in America that we're all wounded by how Donald Trump wants us to feel every day. But there's a lot of good coming, including, except for in Washington, D.C., really rapidly decreasing crime rates.
I mean,
we're the tallest skyscraper in Wichita. Let's celebrate. Some of what Brooks said is true. A lot of it is untrue, particularly the last piece about crime. But some of the economic things he said are untrue, too, in terms of real wage growth. The crime, of course, yeah, we're slightly down in big cities across the country on the murder rate, but the overall violent crime rate in most of those cities, as in Chicago, is up, and even the murder rate is just down from 30-year highs a couple of years ago. So this idea that there's some sort of policy driving a better, safer America is absurd, and that's what David Brooks wants you to believe. I guess he credits the Fed for this alleged soft landing. The interesting thing is the whole, what Donald Trump wants us to believe. I guess David Brooks would have to answer the question, since he and his friends control the state-run media, they're part of the state-run media, they're the press corps for this administration. Why is it that 3/4 of Americans think that they're less well off economically than they were when Biden took office?
Because we are.
Well, because
no, I know, because it's just continuing the lie. And now, we've got an election coming up, so let's get all of our mouthpieces out there to start advocating now for Biden.
75% of the country are Trump supporters. Boy, this is going to be a real runaway if that's true. I don't think so. For more on this, pleased to be joined by our friend Steve Moore, GovZell author and economist. Steve, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, Happy New Year, guys. Great to be with you again. And by the way, I have an answer to your question that you asked Amy. I know why it is that 75% of Americans feel bad about the economy, because they've been brainwashed by the right-wing media. Don't you understand?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's
a dominant right-wing media.
It's that pro-Trump media out there that's filling Americans' minds with. And by the way, that's what they actually believe. That's what the people of Washington actually believe. There's something else going on here that even you guys probably can't appreciate because you're not in the bubble of Washington, D.C., and I do live inside the Washington Beltway. So I'm among these people. There is a bubble. People in Washington live in an alternative universe, and things are great in Washington. I mean, gosh, you keep spending $6 trillion a year. We live high on the hog on that. But the problem is none of these people like David Brooks. And by the way, David Brooks is a friend of mine. I'd say about half of what he said is right, and half of it is an outright lie. But the fact is, people in Washington get rich off of your and Amy's tax dollars, and you send us $1, we send you 80 cents back, and we keep the change. And so what I'm saying is that people in Washington and people in politics have completely lost touch with what real on-the-ground Main Street Americans are feeling in terms of their wallet. It is. Let me just correct David Brooks on one thing, because this lie is told over and over again, and I can't believe this. Either they're incredibly stupid or they're just, being a little careless with the facts. It is true that the rate of inflation is down. Okay, the rate of price increases is less than it was a year and a half ago. No doubt about it. We've gone from 9.2% inflation to about 3.2% inflation. But prices are still rising. These people have to go to the grocery store. Amy, they have to go to the gas pump. They have to pay a mortgage payment.
Can you help me out here? Because I always thought that grocery store prices were related to gas prices because, the trucking companies have to, drudge, whatever.
Yep.
Nothing has changed in our world. I mean, gas prices are down. Somewhere is even, below $3 if you're out in the suburbs or in DuPage County. But why hasn't that trickled down to the grocery stores yet? And is it ever going to?
Boy, but if you guys are paying less than $3 a gallon, boy, I want to find that service station, because we're still paying about $3.49 a gallon here in Virginia, and in California still pay over $5 a gallon. So the price of gallon nationally is about $1.25 higher today than it was when Trump left office. But look, you're exactly right that energy is the most important resource in terms of when energy prices go up, everything goes up. But there's special problems with the food sector. I mean, here's the thing: grocery prices today, for everything from eggs to ground beef to a box of cereal to all the kinds of things that people have to buy, fruits and vegetables. Those are up since Trump came into office by 22%.
Yep.
So that's something to take a standing ovation for Joe Biden. Congratulations.
Well, right. I mean, of course, gas prices are not the only variable when it comes to these other goods and services. The other thing, though, too, is, I mean, your point about the, a slow in the rate of increase is not a decline. It's just it's an increase that's happening at a smaller increment. And then, of course, there's the multiplier effect of that. And a lot of this, by the way, isn't measured by some of these metrics used to measure inflation. So they kick out food and energy prices in terms of what they're presenting into what the real inflation rate is. So there's one thing that's being reported by these dum-dums in the D.C. press corps, and then there's another thing that people are actually paying at the pump and at the grocery store.
So let me also turn to the crime statistics, because there is an obvious flaw that's been pointed out many times about this crime data, because we just don't really have that good crime data. And what's happening is, first of all, a lot of cities aren't really reporting their true, serious felony crime statistics, and so they're omitting the stuff. We know that. We know that this data is flawed, and so I kind of trust the people rather than these statistics, because the people who live in these cities, 75% of them are saying crime is getting worse. By the way, and you're right. The murder rate may have fallen a little bit from an all-time 50-year high since Al Capone reigned the streets, but the property crime is higher than ever. The theft from stores is higher than ever. So how are they saying the crime rates are down?
Yeah, well,
and things are locked up if you go to a CVS store.
Well, it's a lot of retail theft, but I mean, a carjacking is not simply a property crime, and those are way up, for example. So I mean, there's all sorts of traumatic felonies that are being committed that don't result in somebody's death, but result in altering their life for the foreseeable future. And but we just want to talk about the violent crimes that are most convenient to talk about to cast these Democrat polls in the best possible light, and that's
so what's
done in
cities,
Chicago too.
I forget which one. One of the cities, I don't think it was Chicago, because I was listening to a news report last night. They said, I think it might have been Baltimore. They said, the number of murders is down to 260 murders a year. I'm like, that's 5 people murdered every week. I mean, come on, how is that something to applaud? That 5 people are murdered almost one every day is murdered, and they're gonna say, "Oh, thank God, we solved the murder problem." So those are the kinds of things that I think are misleading about these statistics. Now, look, the economy is better, no question about it, but the middle class is still lost about $2,000 in purchasing power during the Biden presidency, whereas under Trump, the average family income went up by $6,000. And that's probably the most important statistic of all.
Well, and the other thing, too, just to go back to gas prices for a second, it's a good write-up by James Freeman over the holiday, as Chevron sent a message to California that you're making it impossible for us to do business here, so we've moved hundreds of millions of dollars in investment elsewhere. In fact, in the last decade, oil production in California has fallen by nearly half. That's good news for Guyana, where Chevron is making investments. It's also good news for those who are fracking on private and state lands in places like Texas and North Dakota, because the oil production in those places, along with the Permian Basin in the Southwest, has exploded. And that's the only reason the rest of the country isn't in the situation of California and actually, as you said, paying $5 at the pump.
Yeah, so the other thing that's going on, and these statistics just came out, I think, earlier this week, is that, the U-Haul data of where people are moving to or from came out. And this is a real world measure of, when people are packing up their bags and leaving one place to another and relocating. And guess what state has had the third most net departures?
Illinois,
behind New York and California. And here's the most amazing thing. Let's say that you're living in the Chicagoland area, and you say, look, I'm just fed up with the crime, the taxes, the liberal progressive policies, so I'm going to move to Palm Beach, Florida. You're going to pay like $4,000 for the U-Haul trailer to move your stuff. Whereas if you were in Palm Beach and you wanted to move to Chicago, you know what you'd pay? Like $500.
Wow, it's a big difference. Well, congratulations to Washington, D.C., because you guys have the highest minimum wage now, starting January 1st. Minimum wage of $17 an hour. How is that going to motivate anybody to achieve, a higher education or to make even more money than that?
Yeah, here's the problem. What you do when you raise, and by the way, a reasonable minimum wage of, $12 an hour, I think is fine. I've always said we should have a teenage minimum wage of maybe $7. My first job when I was 17 was working in a warehouse in Northbrook, and I've said this on your show before, but what I learned from that important minimum wage job is that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life working in a warehouse. Right? But that first job, and that most of the people listening to this show remember the first job they ever had. And you learn a lot, don't you, Amy? What was your first job, Amy?
I worked at Diamond Dave's in Randhurst Mall in Mount Prospect. And Diamond Dave's was the craziest name for a taco joint.
Is it still there?
No. The mall's not even there either. That's
I don't know if Dan has ever had a real job.
No, he was a caddy.
Yeah, I was a
caddy.
caddy. I started
brushed
working
up with the famous people. He caddied for Michael Jordan. Okay.
Oh my God!
Look, let me tell you something. I was working at the age of 11 while you were sitting on your candy ass on the North Shore, Steve Moore. Don't get me started.
Well, I lived right up the street from Indian Hill Country Club, where we had something called a caddy shack. And guess what movie was made?
Let me guess.
Caddyshack. The Murray Brothers, of course.
The Murray Brothers, yep.
Yeah.
And that Caddyshack really does exist, folks.
So
Baby Ruth in the swimming pool.
So are you telling me that the Spalding character was loosely based on your life?
That's me. I had all the girls.
All right, Steve Moore, Economist, Govzilla author. Thanks as always, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay, guys, have a great week.
You too, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560 The Answer.